Well, first of all, thank you so much for joining me. Are you ready?
I am ready when you are.
Cool. So, my name is James. I'm from Culture Slate. I'm here with Mike Hansen, who has been a freelance book researcher for the Star Wars Epic Collection from Marvel and a lot of their omnibuses around Star Wars comics. Before that is actually what I think is really interesting. To start, you were at the very first Star Wars celebration, right?
I was, yeah.
What was it like representing Dark Horse Comics on that stage?
Well, the first Star Wars celebration, it was a very unique experience because this was the very first time that Lucasfilm had put on a fan convention, something that was
Right.
aimed at their millions of fans. And if I remember right, it was in the Denver area, I want to say. It's been a long time, but I remember that it was a few months before Episode 1 came out in theaters. And the Dark Horse booth was like in the main part of this giant hall. They actually rented an old airplane hangar, and it was
Oh,
just
wow.
massive, this massive room with a sky-high ceiling. And so we were one of a lot of different Episode 1 licensees that was showing off our Star Wars stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but we were one of the only people, or booths rather, that actually had something to give to the fans, because most of these were big companies that were showing off like the new action figures or what have you.
Right.
But the official on sale dates weren't until it was closer to the movie. So all we could do was to show off stuff to people. So it was almost like walking through a museum. But at Dark Horse, we had printed out some like promotional flyers and posters and stuff to give out. So our booth got mobbed. I remember I was there with the Star Wars editor. I was the assistant editor at the time.
Mhm.
The Star Wars editor, Pete James, and two folks from marketing at Dark Horse. And we were basically rolling up posters and just throwing them at people because the crowd was like 4 or 5 people deep in front of our booth. And it was a little nuts,
Wow.
but it was a lot of fun.
And I
I
bet it
remember,
was like a totally different environment than they are now at Celebration.
oh yeah, definitely. It's a lot more fine tuned now. The Pepsi booth, I remember they were the only ones I think that was actually giving out stuff. They could give out cans of Pepsi to people that had Star Wars faces on the cans.
God, that's so cool.
Yeah,
And
but the most memorable moment of that, it's a little embarrassing actually, but we brought some black and white photocopies of the upcoming prequel comics that we were putting out
yes.
a month or two later. And one of them was there was like an Episode 1 comics adaptation. And there were also some tie-in and one-shot comics featuring each of the main characters. And one of them was an Anakin Skywalker comic where he has a little adventure during the movie that we wrote. And so we're showing off this preview on the table. And I mean, it's just a photocopy. It's really cool at the moment. In 2 months, it's going to be worthless. But we have to keep an eye on them just to make sure no one's trying to, steal information, get any spoilers.
Yeah.
So I'm keeping my close eye on this one kid. He looks maybe 10 or 12 years old, this little boy, flipping through the Anakin Skywalker stuff. And I kind of just looked down at him, put with a big grin on my face, and a little condescendingly in hindsight, I said, do you like Anakin Skywalker? And the kid looks up at me, he's like, yeah. And then he walks away with this guy that I assume was his parent. Yeah, it was Jake Lloyd.
As soon as you were like, and I kind of condescending, I was like, oh no, it's gonna be Jake Lloyd. Oh, that
Yeah,
is great though.
I felt bad because I didn't
Oh,
mean to embarrass him, but it
oh
was funny in the
man.
moment.
And that's so wild that you brought those comics up because they were some of the first ones that I had ever read. And Dark Horse especially always put out some of my favorite Star Wars comics. Like the really crazy like offshoot stuff they did that I can never remember the name of. It wasn't Tales of the Jedi. It was the series that had like Han and Chewie come to Earth, crash the Falcon, and
Oh,
then he ends
Star
up
Wars
as like
Tales.
Bigfoot. Yes.
Star Wars Tales, yeah.
Did you have
Yeah,
any
that
hand in that?
I was in the Star Wars offices when that series was being created. That came out right after the Episode 1 stuff, as I recall,
Mm-hmm.
because we were starting to more closely coordinate the Star Wars line with Lucasfilm, but also with Del Rey, the book publishers.
Yes.
So that way we could have some stuff tie into each other, make it a little multimedia thing like Shadows of the Empire was in the 90s. And Star Wars Tales kind of opened that up, where we could tell like any story with any creator that would want to work with us. So we were able to get a lot of people who had never worked on Star Wars, like big name creators, who had their own little Star Wars story they wanted to tell. So that first issue was really fun to put together, even though it was way behind schedule. The first story in it was featuring Darth Vader versus, I think they called her the Dark Lady or something. Ooh. I might be mixing her up with a different character, but we ended up splitting it into two, so it was in the first two issues because it was behind schedule. So we had to rush to find other stuff to fill in that first issue, which worked out in the end, but it was a mad scramble to get it out on time. And one screw up with that issue was it was printed on the wrong kind of paper. And most people don't know this, so this might be a little exclusive information for you, but it was printed on kind of cheap newsprint instead of the glossy white paper that we normally use. And it was just a printing mistake. But we also worked with Dynamic Forces to do like a limited edition signed release where a bunch of the different writers and artists that worked on it would sign it. But in order to get those copies to them, we did like a separate print run that had the glossy paper on Tales #1. And unless you're getting there are like maybe a couple thousand signed copies out there that were part of this release. I don't remember how many they did. I have in my collection an unsigned copy, one of the only unsigned copies of the glossy Tales #1. It was just a file copy I had in the office, and
that is so cool,
though. Don't know it exists, but if any collectors see a glossy Tales #1, that's worth big bucks.
Wow, that is really awesome to know, because I never picked up on that as a kid reading it. I never noticed the difference in that paper finish, but yeah, you're right. If there is a copy out there that someone has that's unsigned, that's worth a lot. Another thing I wanted to ask is, you were, I assume you were around in 77 when Star Wars came to theaters for the first time. Were you always a fan? Was this kind of like the career path you wanted to go, or did the whole Dark Horse thing come out of left field for you?
I was always a Star Wars fan. That's one of the first movies I remember seeing as a kid. I actually didn't see it in 77. I saw it on the re-release in 78. And I still remember that opening scene, with the Star Destroyer and everything, and just nothing like it, that first moment seeing that on a big screen. But I never thought that I would really have anything to do with Star Wars. I just thought this was this, unattainable, awesome period of time from my childhood that was never going to come back. And then Dark Horse started doing the comics. Marvel had done the comics in the 70s and 80s, of course. And those were really popular at the time. They were a little hit and miss for me as a kid growing up. But the way I got my job at Dark Horse is kind of a funny story. My parents, as just kind of a surprise gift, they knew I'd always wanted to go. They paid for me to go to Comic-Con in San Diego the summer of '96. And I was just a college student and just going to have fun and spend all my money. So I had a great time. I was in the line at the airport to fly back to Portland, and I noticed that on the suitcase in front of me, it had a little name tag, and I looked closer at it. It was a Dark Horse business card, and it said Diana Schutz, senior editor. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I cannot pass up this opportunity. And I just tapped her on the shoulder and just said, "Excuse me, Ms. Schutz," and just charmed her enough to just asking her, "Hey, do you guys have any jobs up there? I love comics, and I live in Portland, and what can I do?" So we kept in touch for a few months until something opened up in her editorial department, and that was how I got hired. I started almost like an intern, just part-time, helping out the department with like the mail. But within 4, 5, 6 months, I got hired full-time and became an assistant editor, and just rose through the ranks from there. I was there almost 5 years, and it was a great experience.
So let me ask, as somebody that dropped out of college, did you at least get your degree? Did you finish, or did you leave and go to Dark Horse?
I left and went to Dark Horse.
Smart
Yeah.
man.
Well, it depends on who you ask. My
Yeah.
parents were not thrilled about that when they found out.
Oh, I can relate to that.
But
And
yeah, it was a dream job at the time, and there were a lot of challenges that went along with that. I mean, comics people are very creative and esoteric people, so there were a lot of weird personalities in the office. But every day was memorable and fun,
and I bet it was especially wild because you get there like right as they're gearing up for the Phantom Menace and the prequel trilogy, so you've got all of these new ideas and stories that you get to hear about probably before the general public does, right?
oh yeah, oh yeah. Over 6 months before the movie came out and the comics were coming out, we got Lucasfilm to send us reference images of all of the new stuff in episode 1. So that means all the characters, all the costumes, all the creatures, all the ships, and just turnaround photos, reference shots of all that stuff. And I had to make color photocopies of all of this stuff. I had to make a set for every single writer and artist and colorist that was working on all of these prequel comics. So I went through so many toner cartridges.
Oh, I bet.
I probably spent 2 or 3 days just photocopying Star Wars reference that no one in the office was allowed to see except for the handful of us in the Star Wars office.
And how cool that has to have been, especially like you said, as somebody that's been a fan since '78, the first time you saw that on screen, who never thought you'd have anything to do with it. And then you end up in Dark Horse, and now you're kind of like the Star Wars comic book historian in a way, as I've interpreted it, right? By assembling the omnibuses for Marvel Comics and then the Epic collections, right?
Well, I don't know if Marvel necessarily sees me that way, but I'll take it. I do kind of feel a responsibility to try to make these Epic collections as complete and accurate as possible. So it's almost like an archive of the original Marvel and Dark Horse runs, and an opportunity for all the people who weren't there when it happened, who didn't necessarily grow up with it, have a chance to experience all that material. So with the Dark Horse stuff that's now part of the Legends timeline, when Disney first bought Lucasfilm, I had already been putting together some books for Marvel, and I just put my hand up and said, hey, I used to work for Dark Horse. I worked on some of this stuff as an assistant editor, and if you guys want, I'd love to be a part of putting this stuff together. So they just basically said, send us your pitch. Tell us how you want to do it. So I basically broke it all down for them. I put the entire Dark Horse publication history of Star Wars in that chronological timeline order, and said, it doesn't matter when those originally came out. If we put it together in this order, it'll be a chance for it to be collected for the first time as a single epic, a single. Even if it isn't necessarily canon anymore, it's still a chance for people to experience that whole history of Star Wars storytelling. So,
and given, sorry,
I'm just really happy they went for it. I broke it down into eras, and they liked how I did it, and it's worked out really well. There was a lot of Dark Horse stuff I didn't get a chance to read even when I was in the office because we were so busy.
Yeah.
So it's given me a new appreciation of all of the work that all these writers and artists and editors put into putting together such amazing comics.
I bet. And, it really shows just how loved it is by the fans, because Disney's taking a lot of this Legends stuff and adapting it, especially around, like, Timothy Zahn and, I forget his first name. His last name's Stackpole? Michael
Stackpole.
Yeah. With them, and I know that you were uncredited as an editor in some of the Last Command adaptations.
Well, I was the assistant editor when the original comics were coming out. My name should be in issues 4, 5, and 6, but I honestly don't remember. When Marvel has been collecting this stuff into omnibus hardcovers, usually a year or two after the soft covers have been coming out, Some of those I have helped put together. Other ones they've handled in-house. So some of them I've kind of helped out in an uncredited role to make sure that if there was anything we happen to overlook in the Epic collection, we make sure it gets in the omnibus hardcover. So the omnibus collections, if you will be the final form of all the Dark Horse material, a chance for everyone to see everything. In fact, along those lines, I can't say what book it's for because they haven't officially announced it yet, but I just got permission for one of these books to get an additional 32 pages added to it of material that almost no one in America has ever seen. And that's all I can say right now.
That's very interesting. And I know for a fact that we have somebody at our website that handles a lot of Star Wars comic reviews, so that'll probably be on his desk the day it comes out.
Right on.
So I don't want to keep you too much longer. I just had one more question for you, and that's just simply put, what's been your favorite Star Wars comic to read?
Ooh. If I had to pick just one, gun to my head, I'm just going to say it's out of the Dark Horse run because the recent Marvel stuff has been fantastic too, but it's completely different by different people for a different era of Star Wars storytelling. So nothing against that stuff, it's fantastic. But out of the Dark Horse era, I would say my favorite is the second X-Wing story, The Phantom Affair. It was plotted by Mike Stackpole, who wrote most of the X-Wing novels. Mm-hmm. It was scripted by Darko Matson, and it was drawn by Edvin Bukovic. And Darko and Eddie were a couple of guys from Croatia that were discovered by Dark Horse a few years earlier, and they did some Grendel Tales stories that were amazing. But this is probably the best drawn, for my money, the best drawn Star Wars story ever. It's just beautiful. Even the most alien-looking characters are all given unique features and personalities, and it's so immersive, the artwork, that you feel like you're in that world.
That is really interesting, because mine's also the Dark Horse. It's Star Wars Tales. I think it's number 2? The one that has the second half of that story in it.
Yeah.
Because I had to wait for it as a little kid when you're really impatient, and I remember the payoff being well worth it. But I appreciate the chance to talk to you so much, Michael. Is there anything you'd like to say, like where to find you, where to find your work?
Well, I don't have much of an online presence at the moment other than on Facebook. I used to have a comics blog called All Day Comics that was really just too much for me to handle as a one-man operation. I brought in some contributors near the end, but decided that we'll let other people who are more competent and have more free time to do that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I actually want to pay you guys a compliment. I was looking at Culture Slate, and I really like the fact that you guys are treating pop culture news with a certain amount of depth. It's not just repeating press releases. There's actual analysis there and opinion, but it's not the kind of opinion that's just going to annoy half the people who read it. So I appreciate that. You know, the internet really needs a modern Ain't It Cool news without the toxicity that was attached to the old one.
Well, thank you.
A lot of people like to watch videos now, but I get more information when I want comics news. I want to read it quickly. I want to skim it and get that in 1 minute. I don't want to have to watch a 20-minute video
for the ads.
Yeah. A couple of announcements. Well, so the fact that you guys have text, video, the full package, I really appreciate that. And
that is amazing, because I'm actually our writing staff's managing editor, so you're complimenting my work directly, and I appreciate that.
Well, my hat is off to you. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks, and we appreciate you, Mike, and hopefully we can do another one of these again once this new book comes out.
Anytime.
Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate your time. You have a great night.
You too, James. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.